This is the first episode of Connor's Reviews. This episode will be on Far Cry 5. In my opinion, Far Cry 5 is a very good game, but I'm gonna start with the few things I dislike about it. Now, the first thing is, instead of having a good AI with pretty okay or good aiming, they have bad AI with aimbot, which is very annoying, but you just have to get undercover, and that makes that problem go away. But still, easy mode should not be very hard. I also dislike how John's region is like thrown to be the first one, and like the enemies are very easy, but due to the aimbot, there being so many of them makes it the hardest region, which actually makes the regions with less people but they're stronger people much easier, which I don't think was intended on the part of the developers. And also, the guns for hire and the things for hire basically just make the game much easier than it was originally, and it just makes the difficulty down, and that makes it less fun, honestly, because a good part of the game is like the difficulty and fun. Like the story is just okay. Now the villains are some of the best in all of video games, but the story is not good enough to be able to let you just breeze through the game. You should have a challenge because that is a funner part of the game. Now that I'm done with my few concerns about what is wrong with the game, I'm gonna talk about the rest of the game, the parts that I actually like. So, gunplay in this game is very good. The AI is bad, like I was just talking about, but you have very many options for guns, and it's very fun to use the guns in the game. And using cover and such is very fun. Now, my favorite weapon is the bow. I would recommend getting a bow as soon as possible. So, and my favorite thing to do in the game is just play around in the open world, do random things, and it's just like the open world can be a little chaotic sometimes, so that's what makes it fun. Now I'm gonna go on to the spoiler territory because I'm gonna start to talk about villains. So if you haven't played the game before, I recommend you do, but I'm gonna tell you spoilers. Starting now. Now, my favorite part of the game is the villains. I'm gonna talk about them from my least favorite to my favorite. Now, my least favorite villain is John. I think his Baptist thing is the boringest of all of the gimmicks. Like, there's much better gimmicks in every other region. And even though I think his region is one of my favorite regions in the whole game, I'd probably say he's the blandest and boringest of the villains. Now I have at least to talk about him. With Jacob and Faith, I'm going to talk about more. So now I'm going to go to Faith. Now, Faith, she has the best gimmick in the game. The Bliss is a very cool thing, and I like how there in a certain parts of the game you can just like go to the Bliss with her without even having to get the amount of resistance. Now I also think it's cool that unlike her brothers, instead of just like immediately shooting you with a Bliss bullet or an arrow and sending you into the story, they do stuff like trick you by using like a hostage. Like you see a hostage and you go to save them, but then like the hostage disappears and you're teleported into the Bliss. But as he gets more and more angered by your actions, the downtime between your message and you going into the bliss becomes less and less. And but before that, she actually just like tries to convert you. Unlike the other two brothers who like try to convert you but are heavily psychopathic about it, like John and his whole "I'm gonna tattoo your sin onto you and then cut it off." She'll actually just talk to you and try to convince you to join her. And but after a while of you angering her, she becomes more antagonistic and less trying to convert you. And at the end, she ends up killing the Marcel and Virgil. And like it's one of the most annoying things I dislike. Not like it's a bad thing about the game, but Virgil is one of my favorites. Now the Marcel I didn't really like that much. They underdeveloped him and basically made him the murder happy of all the friends. But then after that, you have to like go into a boss battle to kill her. And as you're killing her, she tells you that Joseph gave her drugs when she was just a child, and it's not her fault. Now she could be lying because that is what she's known for, but it's very likely she's not lying. But now I'm gonna start talking about Jacob, my second favorite of the villains. Of course, the favorite's Joseph, but his gimmick of brainwashing you is a very cool gimmick, but he shines when he gets screen time to talk. My favorite time is like when you kill every one of them, they all like talk to you, but he has my favorite of all of those. He tells you about how even if Joseph's not correct about the collapse, the apocalypse is still happening, and describes the American wars that have been slowly pushing us closer to the edge. And honestly, that is a very good one. And then like before that, when he's still brainwashing you, the brainwash really works in a video game. A video game is one of the easiest ways to do that because like you kill all the people and you quick go around this corner and kill the person, and like that's like something you do over and over again, and you don't even realize that that's your first response of going around the corner is to fire, which is like if this was in like a movie or a TV show, you'd be able to really realize that like the character just turns this corner and automatically fires. But in the game, you're the one doing it, so you don't really realize that you're doing it over and over again, which is a very fun thing. I don't really like Eli enough for me to be sad about, killing him. The characters in the Whitetail Mountain is probably the least engaging, other than the villain, who's one of my favorites. But it's much shorter, so you're not there long enough to really get annoyed about how boring a lot of the characters are. Now it's time to talk about the main villain, my favorite character in the whole game, Joseph Seed. Now, he's very well written, and well acted. Like a quote from the creator of the game was like, the audition of the person who ended up being the actor was so good that he would have joined his cult if he was trying to make him join his cult. And Joseph talks about the Great Collapse very convincingly, and he has very scary moments. Like, the scariest moment is when you're in the cage in Joseph's compound. One of the times, Joseph comes in the room and tells you a story where he describes his wife dying, and then he kills his baby in the hospital, and he says it with emotion, but barely any. Like, he's not even sad that he straight up murdered his baby. And later or earlier, it's an open world game, so you could go to this later or earlier. You go to Faith's region, and one of the times in the Bliss, he talks to you about the collapse and says that you can feel it coming too, and he straight up changes the area of the Bliss to this red apocalyptic seeming place, and he's right in the end. It doesn't justify anything he did. Now he finds it as a justifier, and in New Dawn, he is finally realizing that he's a bad person. Now, Dawn is a bad game, but they do Joseph Seed pretty well. Now I'm gonna talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks in all of gaming. The only soundtrack of a game I've played that I feel is better is Hollow Knight. And there's 10 different songs, but with all of the 10 different songs, they have 3 different variants, one for each of the regions, and I find that as a very fun thing about them. And I would recommend this game to anyone who likes playing video games to at least try the first few hours of it. And if you don't have the game, I think you should buy it.